Patrick Christie here at Westmonster. I'm joined today by Nigel Evans. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
We're speaking in the wake of Philip Hammond's long-awaited budget announcement. So what was your initial take on it all then, overall?
Well, they said it was possibly a make-or-break budget for Philip Hammond, and in the past I've been quite critical of the way that he has performed. Always seemed to be more Mark Carney than, more a happy person. Well, today we saw a different Philip Hammond. It's one who's responsible, very good budget, and he sparkled, I thought, today. So overall, I think the budget hit all the right spots for the Tory brigade sitting behind him, and more importantly than that, I think for the country.
One of the highlights of the speech was the fact that he said he's setting aside around £3 billion for Brexit planning. He said he's already spent around £700 million. I mean, is this enough money, and where would you actually like to see that spent?
Well, it's being spent now, of course, by the increase in civil servants that we've had to take on in preparation for Brexit. And yes, I'm delighted that he made that announcement. In the past, I've been reading in between the lines where the suggestion was that Philip Hammond was digging his heels in and saying that there was going to be no preparatory money whatsoever other than that announced. Now he's changed his tune completely. He's announced £3 billion, but more importantly, he added right at the end, there will be more if necessary. And that is
could be for the no deal, I take.
Well, that could be for the no deal, and that is sending a very strong signal to Michel Barnier, to Juncker and Tusk, that if you think that you can punish the United Kingdom simply by being obstructive as they are currently, then think again, because we do have a plan B. The problem with the European Union is they don't have a plan B. And if we walk away without a deal, if we walk away without this transitional period, then they're going to have to find £20 billion that they didn't expect to have on that transitional arrangement. And we're going to have £20 billion more than we were expected. So I think that the Chancellor has got far more wiggle room available to him than certainly the European Union have got.
You've always been quite confident, I think, of a no-deal scenario, haven't you? But do you think more Tory MPs will be more confident now, having seen what he's had to say?
Oh, listen, I think at the end of the day, with a £70 billion surplus for the European Union over us on trade and services, they're going to want to do a deal. The black hole created by the 20 billion if they don't do the transitional arrangements, well, who's gonna meet that? Are the French taxpayers and the German taxpayers going to pay that? Poland is in receipt of £9 billion a year from the European Union. If they're going to carry on funding that, huge question marks for the European Union. And at a time of political instability for countries like Germany, where Angela Merkel, if you talk about a cliff edge, then one politician is standing over the cliff edge, and it's Angela Merkel, then she is going to want to ensure that with the political instability, there's not economic instability there as well. They still want to sell us those Audis, BMWs and Mercedes. We still want to buy them. We want to buy them tariff-free. We want to buy them barrier-free. And I think that if there are going to be elections, then there's going to be a lot of banging on the table by the Bavarian car makers and manufacturers, by the Italian Prosecco producers, by the champagne producers. We drink more champagne than the French. And I think after today's budget, there'll be a few more corks popping, because I believe that what Philip has done today is he's prepared the ground, just in case there's no deal on the European Union. But also, I think that he's leveraged it in such a way that now there's more likely to be a deal from them.
There was one slightly worrying element, which is that the GDP forecast is markedly down over the next couple of years. I mean, what do you make of that? Do you hold much credence to that at all?
I don't, to be honest. I've never done in the past, and I always enjoy when I get hear a gloomy prediction that 6 months later it's corrected, whether it's the IMF or any other body. They seem to pluck some of these statistics out of the air. I mean, so I remember when they talked about immigration, and when we had a number of European Union countries joining for the first time, and we were told only 13,000 of them would come across. That was an official statistic. Anyway, 1 million people later, they said they got it wrong. They do tend to get it wrong, and I'm far more confident about the buoyancy of the British economy. After all, there's one statistic that's hardly ever mentioned. Unemployment used to be a huge problem in the United Kingdom. We now have the lowest level of unemployment in the UK since 1975. Funnily enough, that was the year we had the referendum on staying in the European Union. But it's a massive thumbs up for the strength of the British economy. And we were also told that if we voted to leave the European Union, that unemployment would go up dramatically. Well, it's gone down every month since then.
You mentioned immigration there before. I just wanted to touch on that now because Philip Hammond mentioned about building 300,000 houses every single year to meet with the housing crisis. Would one way of solving the housing crisis not maybe to slash immigration?
Well, let's take this in the round as well. The building of 300,000 houses a year by the middle of the next decade is important because there is a huge number of people who would like to own their own homes and can't. And the statistic he came out with that it's dropped from over 50% who own their own homes to just over 30% now is a dramatic problem for those who want to own their own homes. So building extra homes is absolutely right. But a lot of that does reflect the problem that we've had in the level of immigration into the United Kingdom over a long period of time. The figure is over 300,000 net coming into the UK every year. Well, this does need to be controlled, and that's what we're going to do with the new visa regime that is going to come into play. So we're going to control the uncontrollable, the number of people who could come in from the rest of the European Union with a visa regime. But the other thing he mentioned as well, as I said, look at it in the round, was the help for the first-time buyers on the stamp duty obliteration. We're actually abolishing for first-time buyers up to a level of £300,000 as from now for those young people who want to buy their homes for the first time, and also a recognition that the prices of homes in the London area are more, and so there's a recognition that that level will reach. You can buy £500,000 home, but you'll only get the rebate at 300,000. I think that's absolutely tremendous. You know, that was his probably best shot of the budget because we understand the problems that a lot of young people are facing at this moment who just simply can't get on the housing ladder.
There was a slight omission from what he's just stood up and said in Parliament there, and that was to do with the defence sector, with the police. The implication there is that maybe they do face cuts. Obviously, it wasn't good news, otherwise he'd have said it out loud, wouldn't he? So where do you stand on that? Because we are in a time now of unprecedented national danger with regards to terror. Violent crime is surging. Should we not really be pumping money into our security services?
Well, the devil is always in the detail of any budget. I remember reading The Telegraph once, and they said how it was affecting families the day after the budget. And then 3 days after the budget, after they've read the Red Book, as we call it, and that's because it is red, and it's got all the details of all the announcements that are either made or not made, giving all the details, the precise details. And so they changed, 3 days later, the Telegraph changed their story. People who they said were better off were now actually worse off. But the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for Defence have made it clear that we are going to spend 2% of our GDP on defence. That is going to stay. And so I've got no problems about that. We've got 4 days of debates on the budget resolutions. And I do know that whilst it wasn't mentioned in his speech today, that I'm absolutely certain that it's going to be raised time and time again over the next 4 days.
Fantastic, Nigel Evans. Thank you very much.